everyone, Kelly here, and today I want to share with you my October wrap-up. Before I get to reviewing the books, I just wanted to mention, you probably saw in the last couple of videos that I have changed kind of my filming location, and that's because I didn't feel like I was able to film in front of my bookshelf before because our light in our bedroom was really weak, and so it always seemed so dark, but we got a new chandelier ceiling fan thing, and now it seems pretty bright. Let me know if it seems like it's a good amount of lighting and stuff like that, but this is a pretty convenient place to film because I can lock the door and not have the kids' noise in here, and it's just harder to film outside now that it's approaching winter. So let's get into my books for October. I'm just gonna go in the order in which I read them. I read quite a few books in October, like normal. I'm sorry I'm not getting back into my recent reads. I'm just not filming as often lately, and so I ended up doing wrap-ups, but it seems that people still like watching them, so hope you don't mind a longer video. So the first book I listened to this month was called Big Friendship by Aminatou and Anne Friedman, and it's narrated by both authors. And I had heard about this book because it was a Book of the Month Club pick. A lot of people were hauling it and saying they got it. And from the description, it sounded like it was a book kind of like, to me, it sounded like a book analyzing friendship and how friendship has changed, you know, with the introduction of social media. Well, it turns out that this is more just like a memoir of these two people. I guess these two women have a podcast. I've never listened to their podcast, but they have a podcast about friendship, and it's just them talking about their friendship. And it just wasn't what I was expecting, and I didn't find it that interesting because I was expecting more of a, you know, don't want to say clinical, but like just an actual research about friendship. And that's not what I got. And I was kind of getting bored of listening to their like describing how they met and like every obstacle that they had in their friendship. So I ended up only giving this 2 stars. I feel bad because it's kind of like more like the memoir. So yeah, I would just say if you're going to read it, just going into it that it's not like an observation of friendship in general. It's just basically observing their friendship. And I just didn't really care that much about their specific friendship. I wanted to learn more about friendship in general. So I just felt a little misled because when everybody was hauling it from Book of the Month Club, I didn't feel like the description was correct. And so, yeah, I'm glad I didn't buy it and just got the audiobook online because, yeah, I didn't enjoy that book. But then next I finished Lodestar, which is the 5th book in the Keeper of the Lost City series by Shannon Messenger. This is a middle grade fantasy series. These books are huge, so they take me a long time to read them. Even though they're middle grade, I just take a while to finish these. So I think I read this almost the entire month of September into like October, like the beginning of October, finishing it. But I did really enjoy this one. I gave it 4 stars. I can't really say much about this specific book since it's the 5th one in the series, but I'll just say that I am still really enjoying this series, even though they take a while for me to read. I like how for a middle grade fantasy, they feel a lot more epic because they're constantly adding in new characters and you're getting to know new things that are happening in this world. We're kind of like in an elven world, and all the elves have kind of special powers and stuff like that. We're learning about new powers in every book, and so I just enjoy the series in general. It just takes me a long time to read each book, but that means that I have like a few more books to enjoy over the next several months. So that was a good one. And then next I did a reread. I listened to Beach Read by Emily Henry. I had read this back in like June, I think, something like that. I read the ebook version of it and decided I wanted to listen to the audiobook because I just really felt like a comforting read I knew I was going to enjoy. And once again, I gave this 5 stars. I love it. It's probably my favorite romance book of this year. And it's in case you don't know about it, because it's very popular this year, it's a romance about a woman named January, who she's a writer of romance novels, and she's kind of stuck in a rut, like writer's block. And so she goes to this beach house that her father used to own, and there's a lot about her family and her relationship with her father, which I don't want to like spoil and get into, but she's at her father's beach house in Michigan, and next door is a man who is also a writer, and he writes literary fiction, and he's also having some trouble writing his next book. So they kind of like swap genres to mix it up and learn more about another genre to write from and hopefully get out their next book. And I just think it's a really great romance because even though it is a romance and we're following their relationship throughout the book, it's also so much about them as people. Like, they both have a lot of internal issues happening, either family-wise or just things happening with their past that they're dealing with. And, you know, they're working through those both by themselves and through each other in their relationship. And I just really appreciate that, you know, there's romance, but then there's also more to it. I find it really enjoyable read. So 5 stars for Beach Read. And then I was in the mood for more new romances, so I listened to the audiobook of Kiss My Cupcake by Helena Hunting. I've been hearing a lot of people talking about this one, and it's like a new one in 2020, and so I thought I'd pick it up, and I loved it. I gave it 5 stars again, and I stopped giving half stars this year, so it's hard to say that like Beach Read and Kiss My Cupcake both got 5 stars, but I still love Beach Read more. But I just thought Kiss My Cupcake was super cute. It's about a woman named Blair who opens up a new like cupcake storefront and finds out that right next door is a bar that is like an axe throwing bar. So there's like a lot of noise coming from the wall that they share. And so she goes to confront the owner, a man named Ronan, who is a really good looking guy. And, you know, it's a romance. So things happen from there. It's kind of hate to love kind of romance. And it was just super cute because there was like cupcakes involved. And I don't know, I just thought that their relationship was really cute. But I don't think there was necessarily a lot of substance to it other than the romance. But the romance was really fun to follow. So I enjoyed that one a lot. But I don't know if it's going to be a new favorite that I read over and over and over again. But I enjoyed my experience listening to it. I forgot to tell you guys what each of these was on my Fall Into Reading Challenge. So just real quick, not every one of these books is going to go on the challenge because I kind of stopped running. I started running out of spots that fit for these books, but Lodestar counted for a fantasy, Beach Read was for a romance, and Kiss My Cupcake was for a book published in 2020. And then next, I kind of switched to more, I realized I'm in October. I shouldn't be reading all these fluffy romances. I should be reading like thrillers and supernatural books. So I kind of made a switch to that at this point in the month. And I picked up Hold My Hand by M.J. Ford. And this is a mystery thriller novel. And the problem is that I did enjoy this book, but this book and a book I read later this month made me realize that I'm done with police procedural books. I just don't find them as interesting as I would like to, because this was a really good book, but I only gave it 3 stars because based on my enjoyment, I just was getting bored with the, you know, the formula that comes with a police procedural. Whenever you're following a cop or a detective or whatever, there's always these steps and there's bureaucratic tape you're going through, and there's like, you know, issues at the police station with who's moving up and who's got problems with each other, and I just don't care anymore. So I feel bad because I think both of these books that I read this month probably deserve better than 3 stars, but I've just decided I'm getting rid of any police procedures on my shelf and they're just not for me anymore. But I still want to talk about it because if you do still like police procedural books, I think you'll love this book. It was a lot of fun. I used this as a mystery in the Fall Into Reading Challenge, and basically this is kind of a missing person, missing child kind of book. We're following our main character Josie, that when she was a young girl, I can't remember how old she is at the beginning. She's at an age like probably around 8 where she's a witness to a child being taken at a circus, but she's still young enough that she's not a really great witness. So she witnesses this boy being taken by a clown at a circus when she's 8 or something like that. And then 20 years later, she is now a cop, and a body is found that they think might be that boy that was taken from the circus 20 years ago. So she gets kind of brought back into the case. And, you know, so it's a missing persons case, also a cold case. And the reason I say that I think people would really enjoy this if you like police procedural is that it has a great ending. I think a lot of people call it a surprise ending, a surprise reveal. I figured it out, but I don't think that means that it's bad. I don't want to like say I figure all these things out, but I just read too many thrillers that I do just usually figure out the ending, and I guessed this one pretty early on in the book, but I do think it's a great punch of an ending and reveal. So if you still like police procedurals, I would highly suggest picking this one up. I haven't really heard anybody talking about it, so I do think it's really good. I just am tired of the genre, so 3 stars for me, but still a recommendation for other people that are interested in that genre. And then next I went for supernatural book, and I picked up How to Hang a Witch by Adriana Mather. And this one was fun because Adriana Mather has a personal connection with the story she wrote, and I found that really interesting. Her last name is Mather. She is a descendant of Cotton Mather, who was involved in the Salem witch trials. And this is about Cotton Mather and a descendant of his, and about the Salem witch trials. So I just think it was kind of interesting that she kind of wrote about her history and put a twist on it. So this is about a woman named Samantha Mather, a girl who moves to Salem, and she is descendant from Cotton Mather. And when she moves to town, she finds out that a lot of people in her school really don't like her because of who her ancestor is, and that there are a lot of kids at the school that are descendant from the witches that died during the trials, and so they are really not happy with her being there. And then some supernatural stuff starts happening. There are ghosts, there are witches, like all that kind of stuff in this book, and I think it was a lot of fun. I didn't love it. It was a high 3 stars, so this was a 3-star book for me that I don't regret reading. I enjoyed myself, but I would never revisit this book, and it won't be a book that I highly recommend all the time or put it on recommendation lists. It was just fun. But if you like kind of witches and all that stuff, I think it's an entertaining book. I just think it's one of those that it is a YA book, and I think if when I was a teenager, I would have adored this book, but I think it didn't seem to transcend age. It wasn't something that I loved as an adult, but I do think it was fun to read in October, and I liked that the author had a personal connection with the story and all that, so it was fun. And I used How to Hang a Witch for the supernatural prompt for fall into reading. And then next I listened to He Started It by Samantha Downing, and this is a thriller, and I had enjoyed her last thriller. I can't remember. His Lovely Wife, that's what it was called, which came out last year. I thought that was a fun one, and this one was very similar. If you liked her last book, you'll probably like this one, because they kind of fill the same vein. They're basically books about really unlikable characters doing really ridiculous things, and it's fun, but not necessarily the highest quality thrillers, if you know what I mean. I gave them 4 stars, both of them, because I thought they were highly entertaining, but I wouldn't put them in my favorite list, if you know what I mean. So this is a story about several siblings, or I can't remember if there's 3 of them. I think that's what it is. So 3 of them and their spouses, and they are kind of going on a road trip in order to get their inheritance. Their grandfather's died, and he said in order to get the money, they have to go on this road trip together that is reminiscent of a road trip they took when they were children. And that's all I want to say, because like I said, it's really ridiculous. But if you are somebody that doesn't like unlikable characters, you know what I mean. If you want to be able to root for your characters, this probably is not the book for you, because there is nobody in here that you're gonna want to root for. They are just really probably morally gray or downright bad people. But it was really fun to follow them, even though they were like that. And so I enjoyed myself. I had a good time. So I would recommend it, but just know that you're not going to be getting behind one of them. They're just going to be ridiculously morally gray people. And then next I did a buddy read of this gigantic book, 11/22/63 by Stephen King. And I am glad I did this as a buddy read because I had a lot of thoughts and it was a fun one to discuss. Even though this is a big book, I read it pretty quickly. I listened to the audiobook and also had the physical book, and sometimes when it got to a part that might have been a little gruesome, I would switch to the book so I could kind of read it quickly, but I did enjoy the audio version of this. This is, if you could tell from the title, it's about time travel, and it's about a man that wants to go back in time to save JFK and change the future, basically. And this is one that I had a hard time rating. I started at a 4 stars when I first finished it, but the more I talked with my buddy read people, the more I was like, no, I think it's really a 3 star. I was just kind of caught up in the momentum of the storytelling and the characters, but when I really think of the entire book, then it's more of a 3 star for me. But I would still recommend it if you are somebody that might enjoy kind of a alternative history, like what would happen if something gets changed from the past and all that. But like the high points of this were, I think Stephen King is really great about fleshing out characters and get us really attached to them. So like, I think the main character is done really well, and a lot of the people he encounters throughout, I really enjoyed their characterization. I was super interested in the plot for like the first third, but then there was this huge lull in the middle where I was like, okay, let's get to some kind of point. And I know he was doing that as a way to get attached to the characters, like kind of doing a day-to-day life, but I was getting really bored. And then by the time we got to like the last 100 pages, or 50 pages probably, I was like, okay, I'm ready for something really monumental to happen so that it will make it worth getting through that kind of dull part in the middle. And then I personally was disappointed with the end. Now, the people I was buddy reading with, some people really enjoyed the ending, some people hated it. I just thought it was anticlimactic. And I don't know, I have read, I would say in the last few years, I've read 6 Stephen King books, and I don't think any of them had great endings. And so I just don't think that Stephen King's endings are for me. The problem is that some people can go into a book like this and be like, well, I just fell in love with the characters, his concept was really interesting, and it won't matter to them if the ending falls flat because they're so invested. But for me, it just ruins it for me usually when I read a book and I'm invested in it and then the ending flops. It often brings it down for me. So this is one that I'm just like, yeah, I thought it was good while I was reading it, but I'm kind of grumpy about the ending, and so I will probably never return to this or recommend it because it just kind of fell flat for me and did not get me excited after reading like 800 and some pages. It was a little bit of a letdown for me. And then next I did a cute fluffy reread because that was the kind of mood I was in after reading several thrillers and sci-fi speculative type things. I picked up Starry Eyes by Jenn Bennett. This is a young adult romance basically, and I really enjoy this one because it takes place camping, as you can probably tell. So it is about 2 teenagers that used to be best friends, and then they kind of started to become more than best friends, but then they had a falling out. And now in current time, they hate each other and then end up on a camping trip that they didn't expect it to be together on. Like they were going on a group camping trip and end up both on this camping trip and kind of figuring out if they could be friends again or more or whatever. So it's a romance. So it's kind of like a friends to lovers, but first friends to lovers to enemies, back to friends to lovers. So yeah, if you like a little bit of melodrama, this would be good. But the reason I love it is just because they're outside camping and hiking for a big portion of this book. So I just love that. I'm a sucker for books that involve camping and like kind of falling in love under the stars. So that's why I still enjoy it. 4 stars. It's definitely not 5 stars for me because they don't get to the camping part till probably like this point of the book or something, and so that first like 100 pages I'm just kind of like, whatever, let's get to the camping part. So it's not like 5-star book, but I do enjoy it. Obviously I reread it because I like the camping part, and you know, why not read a summer camping book in the middle of October. And then I picked up a short story. I read Rappaccini's Daughter by Nathaniel Hawthorne. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And the reason I read this short story is because one of the characters is in The Strange Case of the Alchemist's Daughter, which I'm going to be reading in November. So I thought, I wasn't familiar with the short story at all, so I figured I would just read it really quick and find out who that character was. But basically, what can I tell you since it's such a short story? This is just basically about a man who is staying in this home, and his window overlooks the neighbor's garden, and in the garden, this beautiful garden, there's a woman that is also beautiful, and his kind of obsession with her basically. And then we learn more about this woman and the garden, and that's all I'm gonna tell you since, like I said, it's really short. I enjoyed the concept and the things that the story was talking about. I thought the ending was interesting, but it was a hard read because Nathaniel Hawthorne, I don't think his writing is as easy to read as a modern audience as some classics. I don't know, I struggled a lot because it was like a lot of run-on sentences and heavy descriptions and just like clunky language in terms of modern day reading of it. So yeah, I just don't think Nathaniel Hawthorne's writing is for me. I've read a lot of classics that I feel like it was easier for me to get along with, because even though this is a short story, it took me like 2 days to read it, even though it was pretty short, because I had to keep putting it down or else I wasn't understanding anything because I was rereading paragraphs and stuff. So yeah, I thought it was enjoyable as something like to prepare myself for reading that other book, but not necessarily one that's going to lead me to read more Nathaniel Hawthorne. Well, I know this video is getting long, but hopefully you're still here because I'm about to talk about my favorite read of the month, and that was The Broken Girls by Simone St. James. I buddy read this with Krista from BooksandJams, and we just really enjoyed reading this and talking about it. I absolutely loved it. I want to go and like buy all of Simone St. James' books because this was like the perfect October read for me because it's got spooky, but it's not like overly horror, like there's no graphic violence or gore, which is something I can't really take. It's just like the perfect amount of like ghost story spookiness, but then also really great characters and plot and everything. I just thought it was perfect, like the perfect book for me. And so what is this about? I haven't talked to you about it. So this is a dual timeline. So we are following a woman in current day named Fiona, who is a journalist, and she is kind of writing a story about this old boarding school that somebody has bought the grounds and is renovating it, but she has a personal connection with this boarding school and doesn't really want it to be renovated. And then we're also following 4 girls back in 1950 that went to this boarding school when it was still open, and kind of all of their stories and kind of the creepy things that it happened to them at this boarding school, and also kind of their sad backstories that brought them to be at this boarding school together. And yeah, I just loved it. All 5, so you're following 5 perspectives basically, because you're following the 4 girls in the past and Fiona in the present. And I never got confused about who I was following. I felt like each one of them had a backstory that was captivating. I liked how things weave together. I enjoyed the spooky ghost aspects of this, and kind of trying to figure out, was there really a ghost? All that stuff. I like that kind of question. Is it really ghosty or is it explained? I just enjoyed everything about this. Completely captivated the whole time. Loved discussing this with Krista, and I will definitely be picking up more Simone St. James in the future because I think her writing might be my ultimate fall type book. And then once again, after reading the more spooky book, I went to the other end and ended up picking up another romance. I listened to Well Played by Jenn DeLuca. I was really looking forward to this because Well Met was my favorite romance of 2019. I've read it 3 times now. So yeah, I loved Well Met. And Well Played is kind of the companion novel. But you know how some series, when they have companion novels, you don't really need to read the first book to do the second book? Like it might have overlapping characters, but you don't necessarily need to read them in order. Well, this one you definitely should read in order because the characters in the first one are heavily in this one as the main side characters. So I would suggest reading them in order. And I don't know, I was just disappointed by this one. The romance in the first one had so much chemistry. I really love the setting. It's set in a Renaissance fair. And yeah, I just loved it. Where this one didn't take place as much in the Renaissance fair. We're following a woman that was in the first book, and she starts having a like online relationship with this guy who is a musician from the Renaissance fair. But like they start their online relationship right after the first Renaissance fair ends. Then they're talking online all year, and then we don't get back to the Renaissance fair until several hundred pages into the book, I believe. I was listening to the audiobook, so I don't know exactly when, but it definitely was a long time. They've built up their whole relationship before we get back to the Renaissance fair. So it just didn't really have that setting that I loved in the first book. Also, their relationship was a little more passive. There wasn't like, in the first book, I felt like there was a lot of the sparks, the hate to love kind of sparks, where this one was kind of just a passive, like, friendship blossoming kind of story, since they were corresponding just online for the first half or so of the book. So it wasn't like those like moments together face to face. And I normally like a correspondence book, but yeah, this one, I don't know what I should tell you. I guess if you don't want to know anything going in, skip until this timestamp, but it is written in the synopsis, so I don't know how much is spoiler other than if you just don't like reading synopsis first. But if you want to know, like, their correspondence turns out to be catfishing, and we know in the synopsis that she's not talking to the guy she thinks she's talking to, but like, you know, we're as an audience like listening for hours to them, like, you know, developing this relationship, and we know it's going to come to a head where she's going to find out that he's not the guy that she's talking to. And so it's hard to get on board of a relationship that starts with catfishing. So yeah, that's no more spoilers. That was just part of something that happened. We don't find out about till later in the book, but it was in the synopsis. So yeah, I didn't get necessarily fully behind the relationship. And yeah, so I gave this one 3 stars. I still really like Jenn DeLuca's writing. I like the characters that are in this series, and I will be reading the next one because I believe the woman that one focuses on is somebody I'm really excited about because she's been in all the books. And so yeah, I'm looking forward to that one, but this one was a big disappointment for me in terms of how I enjoyed it compared to the first one. I'll be reading Well Met over and over again, probably for years to come, but I won't be reading Well Played again. It's just not going to be one I come back to. And then the last book I read in October is The Dry by Jane Harper, and this is a thriller. And this was the other one. When I was talking about Hold My Hand earlier, I said I was done with police procedurals. This one really put the nail in the coffin that I'm definitely done with police procedurals, because this is a book that is praised a lot, has a really high rating, it has won awards, people love it, and I'm like, oh, I'm so bored like through the book. And I don't think it's the book's fault. I think it's just I'm done with that, like, being a cop and researching what's happening and going and interviewing the suspects and all that stuff. Like, I'm just done with it. So I was bored. I gave this 3 stars. If I wasn't listening to the audiobook, like if I was reading this physically, I might have DNF'd it or given it 2 stars. But this takes place in Australia, and the narrator is Australian, so I basically just finished the book because I really enjoyed hearing his accent. And so that I just bumped it up to 3 stars because I enjoyed the experience of listening to the book. But in terms of the plot, I was so bored, and even the ending was not compelling enough. Like, at least in this one, I thought the ending was amazing and really well done. But this one, I was just like, yeah, that's the ending. Who cares? I didn't really care when I got to the end. After I'd been kind of bored the whole time, it wasn't enough of a like punch of an ending. Yeah. I think she does do well with the atmosphere, like it takes place in Australia. Though I will say, I've heard some people in their Goodreads reviews complain about the fact that it didn't feel like Australian enough. And I noticed that times when I was listening to the audiobook and looking through the book, they definitely Americanized it. So if you have the American version, they switch out basically all the Australian slang. And I think that's a disservice to the book. Like, I get that like people might not know what a ute is. Like, ute is an Australian slang word for utility truck, otherwise known as a pickup truck. And when you read the book in physical form, it says pickup truck, but in the audiobook it actually says ute. And there's other, I'm not going to mention all of them, but there's lots of slang words like that are changed. And so yeah, if you're just reading the physical book, you might not really feel like these are Australians speaking to each other. And I think that does a disservice to the book to Americanize it. Like, we are fully capable of using Google and looking up what a slang word means. And I think when you're making an atmospheric book, you shouldn't change the words for an American audience. I mean, we all can just research and find out some things about a different place in the world. Like, isn't that part of reading? So I was disappointed to find that out when I was looking in the paperback, and I'm really glad that I did the audiobook, because I probably would have given it even a lower if they weren't using actual Australian slang in this book. So yeah, I didn't even tell you what this is about because I was so disappointed. Sorry. This is about a federal agent named Aaron Falk who returns to his hometown. He hasn't been back to his small backcountry hometown since he was a teenager, but he comes back because his best friend from childhood, his whole family dies basically, and so he comes back for the funeral, and then he is asked by the father and mother of his childhood friend to investigate because I don't know how much is told in the back. Yeah, it doesn't say. So basically he's just asked to investigate because they think the police aren't doing enough to find who killed the family. And so yeah, he's kind of pulled into this investigation about his childhood friend back in a hometown that hates him and that he hates and all that stuff. So yeah, it's got that whole like small town vibe, returning to your hometown, all that. I think if you like police procedurals, maybe you'll like this. It's harder for me to recommend this because I didn't think the ending was spectacular. But I do think the setting is great, and I would suggest doing the audiobook, or at least maybe find the Australian version of the book instead of the Americanized version, because I think that's just upsetting. Like, I never like it when they take out words that would like associate a book with a place. It's just a pet peeve of mine. Yeah. So that's it for me this month. This is a really long video, so I apologize for that. What did you really love in October? Have you read any of these that you would like to discuss? I would love to talk to you down below, and I'll see you next time. Bye.